Drew, this is Commissioner Hanson. I just want to check and make sure that you can hear us and we can hear you, and same with you, Kathy and Eldon.
I'm good.
Eldon's ready.
I'm ready too.
Awesome. Okay, everybody, welcome this evening to our Planning Commission meeting for June 16th, 2021. My name is Commissioner Hanson. I'm the chair of the Planning Commission. At this time, we'll start with our agenda items with a prayer. I'll be giving the prayer this evening, followed by Commissioner Bullock will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Our Father in heaven, as we come before thee in prayer this evening at the beginning of this meeting for the city of Washington, we're thankful for the safety that thou hast provided to get us all here. We're thankful for this responsibility and this opportunity as well to deal with the affairs of the city, to help the growth, to help build the city into something that we all want to continue to be proud of and to live in and take pride in. We're grateful for all the individual blessings that each of us enjoy. Please watch over us this evening as we travel home. We will do so in safety, and we say these things humbly in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Bullock. Commissioners, item number 1A, we'll look for an approval of the agenda for this evening, and I'll look for a motion when you had a chance to review that.
This is Shill. I would make a motion that we approve the minute or the agenda for tonight's meeting.
This is Commissioner Musso. I second that.
I have a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved this evening as is listed here, no changes. Item number 2, approval of the minutes from June 2nd. You've all had a chance to receive those in your packets, and look for a motion for that as well, unless there's any corrections or additions that need to be made through Kathy. Kathy, there were some corrections that were sent in by Commissioner Anderson, just making sure that you've received those.
I did, and the minutes that was presented to you are a reflection of those changes.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Anderson. I make a motion to approve the minutes from the June 2nd meeting, 2021.
This is Shill. I would second that.
Got a first and a second. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed here? All right, this time the minutes are approved and set to record for June 2nd. Are there any declarations or abstentions for conflicts of anything on the agenda this evening from the commissioners?
Not me.
I have none.
None as well here. All right, we'll get right to our first agenda item this evening. Item number 4A. This is a minor subdivision. It's consideration to approve a conceptual plan for the Good minor subdivision located at 400 South, 100 East. The applicant is Douglas Good. I'll turn the time over to staff for the report.
Thank you, commissioners. Is that exhibit showing up on your screens out there?
Yes.
Great. Applicant, as stated, is requesting approval for the conceptual Good minor subdivision plan. The applicant is wishing to split the present 0.47 acre parcel into 2 lots. Parcel 1 is parcel 180-C of the subdivision, will be a 14,097 square foot lot, which is an equivalent of 0.32 acres. Parcel 2, which will be recognized as parcel 180-G of the subdivision, will be a 6,450 square foot lot, or an equivalence of 0.15 acres. Both proposed lots meet the minimum 6,000 square foot required for the zoning at this location, which is the single family residential 6,000 square foot minimum R16 zoning in the Washington City or regulations. The surrounding zoning to this parcel is R16 in every direction, northeast, south, and west. Staff has reviewed the requested proposal, and the proposed conceptual good minor subdivision conforms to the standards as set forth in the zoning regulations and in the subdivision ordinance of the city. Therefore, staff would like to recommend that the Planning Commission approve the conceptual design of the good minor subdivision based on the findings and subject to the conditions below. I think Brandon wanted to have a moment there in the chambers to explain one thing as it relates to the improvements that are required on subdivision. So Brandon, would you come up and share that with the commissioners?
Brandon Wright with Public Works. I've already spoke with the owner, Mr. Good, and we have a deferral agreement on the first lot in place for the improvements. And we've already spoke about the second deferral agreement on that second lot. So it'll cover that, the improvement, the bonding, what is required. That deferral agreement will just push it down the road farther at the time when it's called by the city. It'll be taken care of at that time.
Brandon, would you explain what a deferral agreement is?
They don't have to do the improvements right now. They can defer them to a later date. The sewer, or well, not sewer, water, the curb and gutter, sidewalk, and the asphalt would be required along that street. They can just defer them to a later date.
So is there a date certain for that, or is it just?
No, it's just, I think when the city calls it due, or whenever we start to develop, we see more development on that road. There's not really
There are conditions in the contract that makes the date certain. If, for example, one of the common conditions is if they seek to sell any of the lots that are part of the plat, the minute that they're trying to sell a lot, the city would call them due or require that they be bonded for. So the agreement itself usually does not say you will build them by date certain, but it says that if you do any of the following, then they are due. And so essentially the choices of the developer define that date with time.
I think I probably better get with you and have you review our current deferral agreement.
Mhm.
Because we had, that one that we did on the previous one, that's a separate, it's not worded that way. So maybe we got to get with that before we go further. But we're going to have a deferral agreement signed and notarized and recorded with the county.
Okay, so when you say, so as an example, the smaller lot, there's houses on both these.
Yeah.
Already. So if they decide to sell that smaller lot, then they'd have to put in curb gutter and sidewalk in front of the house? Is that what you're saying?
Or do the deferral agreement, which pushes it down the road. So we can defer it to a later date is what,
Okay,
that the old part of town, this is common in the old part of town. So
Brandon, so how far down the road will that be kicked? I mean, could they pass the deferral on to whoever they sell the lot to? I mean, could that person defer or like that said, would it be
the way that
triggered?
the way that it is right now, it's recorded against that property. So it could go, it's just with that property.
So a new owner could go and get a bond and defer it.
And I think like we were talking, we can put certain stipulations in there to where it just makes it so they don't have to go get 110% bond, because those bonds are typically good for a year, or we have to extend them. So this deferral agreement gives them a little more time that they can push it down the road.
So a good example that's currently happening is the Dam Road project, where that road's being improved and widened. Most all of the residential and even the commercial properties along the road in decades past had signed a deferral agreement that basically said they acknowledged that the time would come that they would need to contribute in the right of way and in the construction of improvements.
Your
And
client signed one.
yeah, and in the last year or two, Brandon's department's been meeting with all of them, reviewing their agreements from the past and using that to formalize the project. So my first comments were about, say, a subdivision with multiple houses or multiple lots, where the minute they sell one, we want things on the ground so those don't get pushed to next owners. Some improvements on certain roads, Dam Road's a good example, the downtown section that lacks curb and gutter and sidewalk. There's deferral agreements that have been in place for years probably
Probably
decades.
20
probably
plus
decades.
years.
And so sometimes the deferral agreement triggers on the action of the property owner. Other times it triggers on the preference of the city and when they're wanting to install those improvements.
It is recorded against that property though, so we recorded against that actual property parcel number.
Hey,
Typically,
Brandon?
just the change of title
Right,
doesn't trigger
Brandon,
the
time
date.
out. This is Sheil. Question I have is access. Looks to me like their drive for the small lot is coming off of the large lot. Is that correct?
You have the owner right here, and I'm assuming it's gonna access off of 400 South is that correct? Yeah. So I know that,
So he's gonna go across the ditch?
well, we have certain specs that we can, get across that ditch with the D arch.
Okay. Lucky guy. Are there curb and gutter and improvements there up the road? Okay.
Whoever was speaking needs to come to the mic. I cannot hear what they're saying.
Well,
Yeah, I think we're talking to Mr. Good. Mr. Good, do you want your name attached to the comments? You just said, I think it would be important because it is relevant. If you wouldn't mind coming up to the microphone, letting Kathy know who you are.
Kathy, it was Dan Good.
She probably wants you to repeat them a little bit.
About the water and it being.
Okay, so the
in
water, I
right?
didn't get any water transfer, irrigation water with that property. And I'm the last one on that ditch there. So as it crosses under the road, it hasn't been used for a long time. So it's already all covered to the north of me. So, but I do realize that there's a right of way that the irrigation company has for a ditch. So.
All right. Thanks, Dan.
Okay.
Appreciate it. Commissioners, do you have any other comments for staff?
I guess this is a follow-up question maybe for Thad or Brandon, just for my clarification. So if this is not triggered on, let's say, sell of the property, it's primarily triggered on if and when the city decides, hey, we want to improve this road, and at which point it'd probably be the whole road, I'm assuming. I mean, from looking here on Google Maps, it looks like really the only thing we have curb and gutter on is the corners of the intersections, radiuses. So that would be something that if the city's like, hey, we're ready to do this, then it would be triggered, right?
Yeah, you look at the Google Maps and you'll see 400 South at that location isn't built to full width even yet. And you'll see 400 West or 400 South to the east is wider, but even those properties don't necessarily have curb gutter and sidewalk on them. And the city understands that there's a project somewhere in its future that these things need to be completed. And when they decide to undertake that, these signed deferrals will greatly facilitate the project. It essentially removes the landowner's ability to protest the project and commits them to participate in whatever the funding decision is as to how those are paid for.
Okay, thank you.
All right, commissioners, I'll look for, if there's no further comments, I'll look for a motion on item 4A.
This is Commissioner Bullock. I'll make a motion to approve the 4A. Sorry, guys. Approval of the conceptual minor subdivision located at approximately 400 South and 100 East. With the 4 conditions. This is Commissioner Anderson, I second.
Drew, just for a point of clarification, I love Commissioner Bullock. I just want to make sure that we can accept a motion from him if we're all here. You are? Okay. All right, I've got a first by Commissioner Bullock. I've got a second by Commissioner Anderson. Individual voting, Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Shield,
Aye.
Bullock,
Aye.
Musso,
Aye.
and I am Hanson. I'm an aye as well. Item passes unanimously. Improving the conceptual plan. We'll move to item 5A. This is a preliminary plat. This is also a public hearing. This is for consideration and recommendation to our city council for the Oak Grove Meadows preliminary plat located approximately 2800 South 240 West. The applicant is Amira Development. I'll turn the time over to staff for their report.
Thanks, Commissioner. The applicant is requesting approval of preliminary plat for Oak Grove Meadows subdivision and is proposing 24 home sites on an area coverage of 18.01 acres. The zoning designation at this particular location is R115. The surrounding zoning is R110 to the north, county property, and R115 to the east, R110 to the west and south. The proposed subdivision conforms to the approved zoning. The request meets the subdivision requirements, and staff does have some concerns with the proposed LID, and Public Works cannot recommend approval due to the lot-specific retention being in conflict with city ordinance. However, the city council may approve this type of LID if they see fit. Washington City does not allow LID on individual lots unless approved by the city council, and staff cannot recommend that the planning commission recommend approval of the preliminary plat for the Oak Grove Meadows subdivision to the city council based on the following findings and subject to the following conditions, all of which are the standard 12, and I'll let Brandon address the 13th condition from the public work side of things. Brandon, do you want to step in here?
Brandon Wright with Public Works. I wanted to explain this condition. It's not that we don't want you guys to recommend it now. We have to, as staff, individual lot LID is not recommended by Public Works. This needs to be an approved by the city council. The reason behind this is it puts, when the ordinance went through the city council, it puts the annual inspection responsibility on the individual lot owners, which the city council was not in favor of. They want it to be on an overall like retention area versus having the individual lots. So it's set up and managed by an HOA. So it's not putting that burden on the individual homeowners, because like if they sell a lot or sell a house, now that's supposed to transfer. A lot of times they don't know that. So this approval on this individual lot, we're okay with. I want this to be very clear that Public Works is okay with this design. It's just the LID has to be approved by the city council. I don't want it to be held up by my recommendation saying that we can't recommend approval. We just have to have city council approve this.
Is an 8-inch pipe big enough?
That's something that it's going to have to go through the hydraulic. We've already talked to the engineer, the hydrology. He's looking at it hydrology wise. We don't know. We think we've come to a conclusion with the engineer on this. So by the way that the ordinance was set, we have to do it this way and have the city council approve it. So I don't think there's any reason to recommend denial based on this. It's just that it needs to go that way.
So what's the advantage of having each individual lot have their own LID as opposed to the detention basin, other than the fact that that detention basin would have to be larger and they'd probably lose one lot?
That's
that
one
it?
thing. And then you got the shallower drainage, so it'll evaporate quicker, if we ever get water. So it'd evaporate quicker, and your infiltration rate, you'd have some bigger areas for the infiltrations over here.
So they all drain to that detention pond?
So right now they're not. They're right now what they do is they're supposed to stay on the individual lot, and then the back of lots, the rear of lots, and then they're supposed to infiltrate into the ground.
How do they drain if they're pipe? Or how do they evaporate?
That's one thing we've discussed with the engineer. So he's I don't, he might be on he actually might be on the line. So we've talked to him this week. I just don't want it to come across as we're recommending denial. I want just the city council needs to make this
I
decision.
like the idea.
Brandon, this is Mark Fonger. I'm on the line if needed.
Mark, this is Commissioner Hanson. Do you want to speak to anything that's been said so far about your project?
Absolutely. So this is a continuation of the project across the street, and this is the same methodology that we used on that project. There's a couple of challenges out here, as you may well know. The topography is very flat, and the storm drains that exist are quite shallow. We also have shallow groundwater. The groundwater currently sits between 4 and 6 feet. According to the geotechnical engineer, it's been as shallow as 3 feet when they're actively flood irrigating adjacent properties. So when you start talking about the LID, which stands for low impact design, and is really a stormwater quality issue, the intent of that program, or it's called the Dixie Stormwater Coalition, and the intent of that program is to positively impact the stormwater quality that makes it to the Virgin River. So there are 12 recommended best management practices, or BMPs, and 9 of those are eliminated because of the shallow groundwater. They just don't, there's concern that they would work. Then you look at the following, the remaining 3. One of them is a green roof, and a green roof would be something that would be required on each structure in the subdivision. Now, if you were building an apartment complex or a commercial property, that might be something you want to do. In an arid climate, that really doesn't work very well, and we can go into those details if you'd like. The last 2 then remaining are harvest and reuse, which means rain barrels for each individual lot, or bioretention cells. The bioretention cell would be eliminated because there's not a good outlet. The bioretention cell, what you do is you put your water into an engineered landscape feature that the stormwater then filtrates down through some topsoil, then through some gravel, and eventually out a pipe. This subdivision does not have a pipe outlet. Now, we did meet with staff, and that connection on Tree Street to the west, the adjacent developer is going to be required to bring a pipe to us. So we may be able to get a bioretention cell in where the detention pond is, okay? And if that's the case, if it's deep enough, we can then eliminate the requirement for the individual lot LID improvements. However, that's not available to us at this time, and it wasn't available to us when this plat was submitted a couple of weeks ago. So that's new information. I wanted to talk a little bit about why we proposed this. So we are actually proposing retention basins on each lot, and the volumes we're talking about are very small. That detention pond, as it's drawn on the preliminary plat, contains 10,000 cubic feet of volume. This project only requires about 1,000 cubic feet. So we didn't do this to try to save a lot or to save the developer money. We did this because we thought it was the most functional design. If you have individual lot retention basins that are the volume is very small and the depth is very shallow, then you get a lot of evaporation. These would function as dry, except after large storm events, which is the way they should function. So these individual lot retention basins would evaporate, they would function, they wouldn't create mosquito habitat, they wouldn't create wetland or algae growth or other types of things that would that may happen if you did a more region-wide or project-wide retention basin. These are designed to overtop into the 8-inch pipe. They're not designed to be drained wholly by the 8-inch pipe. So each one of these basins is actually dammed off up to 6 inches deep, and then it would spill over the top of that 6-inch deep. It's a landscape swale or landscape area, and it would spill into that pipe. So anything that overtops that would spill and drain away. So I heard one of the commissioners say that they didn't understand how we were going to put a pipe in and then retain it on site. That's how it's designed to function. If we put all of this volume into a single retention basin in the bottom of that proposed detention basin in the northwest corner, then you collect all of the nuisance water from all of the homes, and you end up with something that's always wet, and that can become problematic. And our discussions with staff, they agreed that that wasn't the best solution, and they actually liked this this design. We did have a good discussion also with one of the engineers there on staff with Washington City that changed the way we're looking at this, and we may be able to eliminate these individual lot basins if that is, I guess, required by the city. I think there was one other thing I wanted to address that was stated, but now I can't remember what it was. So does anybody have any questions for me after that long and drawn out explanation?
This is Commissioner Musso. So Brandon indicated that there would have to be an inspection done. So is there an inspection required every year on these, Brandon? Is that my understanding is what you said?
That is correct. Every year there's an annual inspection performed on. You have a stormwater maintenance agreement that's recorded with like a basin. So these individual lots, they would be required to have a stormwater maintenance agreement. So these would be, that's where it's fallen in, why the city council needed to approve this, because it'd go individual lot, how they'd have to be assessed this inspection.
So who does that inspection? Is that
Private inspectors, they have to hire an inspector to come and do that.
okay? Thank you.
This is Commissioner Hanson. Before I move any further, at this time, what I'm going to do is open up the public hearing. Mark, that way there might be some more questions that are directed to you. So if you'll stay on the phone. I'm going to open the public hearing this time. Is there anybody here in the chambers that would like to make a comment with regards to this item? It doesn't appear so. At this time, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
This is Commissioner Musso. So moved.
Shield second.
I've got a first and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, the public hearing is now closed. Commissioners, I'll open the floor up again for any questions you might have for the developer. Or Mark, did you say you're the engineer or are you the developer on this project?
I'm the engineer. The developer's in the audience there.
Okay, perfect. Commissioners, any other questions?
So this is Commissioner Anderson. So the question here is not really whether this LID will work. And that's kind of what Brandon had said. And that's what the engineer had said as well. And that's not really up to us. I mean, this is up to, the hydrologist and the engineer, whether it'll work or not. That's not really the point of what Brandon's saying. What he's saying is that because LID requires a year inspection, if it's all at the detention basin, then it's HOA land. It's easy for the inspector to look at it and sign off. So the reason that he had requested denial is because of the access to the backyards for the inspection. That's really the issue here. And
I think, sorry to interrupt. I'm not sure that's, these would all be built and maintained in public utility easements. And so there is guaranteed access. I think it was the responsibility of the individual homeowner to hire a third-party inspector.
right.
It was the concern. Yeah.
I know that. That's what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. Okay.
What I was saying is by the ordinance, the city council has to approve this.
Right.
I was trying to be very clear that we're not recommending.
No, and I know that. That's
Denial on this. We are in favor of this design. We just have to follow these steps.
right. That's kind of what I was summarizing, is just that the real issue is access to the property, and because it's on private property, it has to go to city council for approval to do that. That's the thing. But, so I have a question for the developer. So in this, and again, this design will work. I've actually done this design quite a few times, so it does work. But from past experience, one of the biggest challenges is either people getting upset when they realize that they have to do the inspection, and they're like, well, I didn't know that when I bought the house.
Right.
The second one is if you ever do get standing water because you have a big flood or and the groundwater is close by, you know, it's one thing to say, well, it's engineered to have standing water for a day or so or whatever. But homeowners tend to come and yell at you and get upset when they're like, why do I have standing water? And I'm gonna have mosquitoes and all this stuff. Even if that's not true, that still, I've been down that road and people tend to do that. So I guess my question would be just an idea, not asking for it, but would it be easier to section off that easement section right there where those storm drains are and call that common area? So where that way you never have an issue and it's common area, just like the detention basin. And then it's part of the HOA to inspect the detention basin and those areas in between. And then you sort of bypass that whole issue. Just an idea.
And as the developers here, when and if you do speak this evening, will you please remember just state your name for Kathy? Thanks.
We've talked about putting a note on the plat that each individual lot, you know, if it goes through and is passed this way, each individual lot would be responsible for this, each LID on the lot at that time. So there is ways of making each individual lot owner responsible.
You know, and I know that it's just nobody reads their plat. So I'm just thinking of a way to bypass all the headache and just put it in the HOA from the get-go.
Dwayne Schellenberger, developer. Thank you. That's a great suggestion. One other thought that I had along those same lines is if we had an HOA formed and in the HOA, it specifies that one contact handles the inspection each year so that the city's not trying to track down multiple owners. We're open. We are very grateful for Brandon, all of staff, all of you, and we're just trying to make this work. One thing that came up is the fact that when you have high water table, if we create a detention area, we just created a pond that's permanently there with mosquitoes and whatever. So the reason that we chose this solution was the fact that it is 6-inch. It's going to evaporate. There's a solution that doesn't create a problem long-term. So that was the thought.
This is Commissioner Anderson, so I guess my comment, I guess mainly my comments to the rest of the commission. I think the proposal is good. I think the engineering, you know, is sound, and they still have to go through the hydrology and all that and make sure that it works. I think, you know, we can recommend to city council that, you know, they can move forward. But again, I think the biggest key is they have to look at what's the simplest way to ensure access so people aren't upset, and it's, you know, it's either one point of contact or maybe it's part of the open area or whatever, just so you don't have angry homeowners down the road.
Yeah, and I think a motion would be to recommend reserving the issue of LDI to this LID, sorry, LID. How all my acronyms go, reserving the issue of LID to all, to the council. And so you would make a motion as to everything, but with reservation and LID. It's a shame because in 10 years, when there's no flood irrigation surrounding this property, I think the hydrology is entirely different. But right now it's sitting around land that gets soaked every 10 days. And
So at this point though, also, I mean, you have half-acre lots that aren't going to have pools. I mean, because you can't dig a pool if you have a 3-foot water table, right? So good question. What's happening is they have to bring in more fill. They're gonna have to build up their lot if they want a pool. And often in the fields, as we've learned, they go to a fiberglass pool instead of gunite to try to mitigate that. Mitigate it. Yeah. Okay.
good perspective.
So I guess that gives me another question for you, right? If people are bringing in extra fill, I mean, you've got the lots graded here where there's only 6 inches of fall from one lot to the next. So I mean, it's pretty tight grading. If one guy brings in a foot or two, that's going to change all of your stormwater flow. So
I'm going to let Mark,
I don't know if I
do you
would
want to talk to
give them
that?
free reign to bring in fill.
True. Mark, do you want to address that?
Absolutely. So yeah, if they're going to bring in fill to get a portion of their lot up, they still have to maintain some drainage way. And that's one of the reasons why we put in and proposed the multiple 8-inch pipes in the back. We actually wanted to go a little bit bigger, Commissioner Anderson. But the grade is just so flat that getting that back underneath the road and into the detention basin, we may end up looking at multiple 8-inch pipes to do that just once we have the flows calculated and get the final design. But leaving those pipes in there does allow those individual lots to drain. They're also plenty deep. I mean, these are big enough that if they do bring in fill, they will need to or will have the ability to leave the last 7.5 feet in the back of their lots, which is that utility and drainage easement, lower, and that'll allow the water to flow through the lots in the rear to the lower lot to the adjacent. But it's understandable if you were to go in and grade the entire lot up a couple of feet that you could start creating some issues but there is room at those rear lot lines to slope back down to existing grade.
Is there a maximum amount of fill that we can allow them to bring in so we can avoid that issue?
Yes.
Is that something that you see in what you do?
I mean, I don't think it's not necessarily an issue with the preliminary plat. It's just, I would just be careful making statements that people can bring in fill when you got a pretty carefully graduated slope in your community. That's all.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking out loud as we discuss this, but it's going to be a decision made at the front of whether at the end of the day, we bring in some additional fill to his point. So.
I mean, because if you brought in any fill, you'd really want to start all the way down at the south end and they all get a little bit of fill. So you've got, say, a foot between lots rather than 6 inches or whatever. It's just again, it's not anything necessarily with this. It's just, if you had one guy, say, right in the middle of it, raise his lot up 2 feet, that's going to change all of your drainage. That's all.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Understood.
Sure. For sure. Commissioners, any other questions? If not, we'll look for a motion at this time. Public hearing's been closed. Drew, I have one question that's been on my mind since I first saw this. It seems a little awkward in my mind that we would be recommending something for approval that, can we even approve it? Like I don't know, it just seems weird to me. It's not that I'm against the project at all. I think it's fine. And I'll let city council obviously handle that, but it feels a little funny.
No, I get what you're saying. It's like, because Public Works is saying their hands are tied, that they can't recommend because it's not in their adopted options for the LID.
Yeah.
But they're okay with the design, but the council's the only one who can do that. So that's why I think city attorney there was, referencing that you guys would just make special note in your motion that, we understand the concerns that Public Works has. We understand what's on the books. And the council is the only one who can override what's on the book by a specific design. So, let that give you some comfort that you like everything else. Staff is good with everything else, but the council is the only one who can actually, approve that alternative design. Hope that helps you.
Yeah, it does.
Drew, if I may make one more statement.
No, just kidding.
Okay. Planning Commission, basically everything you recommend is a recommendation, and we understand that, and we hope that you recommend for approval, but it's my opinion, having been through a lot of these public hearings in the past, that it is actually within your right and responsibility to make a recommendation, because you're not actually approving the individual lots. You're making a recommendation to the city council. So this would be similar to the lot layout or the street layout. Planning Commission has the ability to make that recommendation.
Thanks, Mark. Commissioners, I'll look for a motion at this time, or if there's any clarifying questions you might need to ask with regards to the motion, please do so.
This is Commissioner Anderson. I make a motion that we approve preliminary plat approval for Oak Grove Meadows subdivision located at 240 West, 2800 South, with the standard 12 conditions plus the condition that city council review the on-site LID requirements, and that only city council can approve that type of an LID.
This is Commissioner Musso. I second that motion.
I've got a first by Anderson, a second by Musso. Individual voting: Anderson,
Aye.
Shield,
I, but isn't there only 11 conditions? You said 12?
12 plus the 13th, which is city council has to
13,
approve the
okay.
on-site LID.
All right.
Commissioner Shield,
Aye.
Commissioner Bullock,
Aye.
Commissioner Musso,
Aye.
Commissioner Hanson. I'm an aye as well. The motion passes. We'll recommend to city council approval on item 5A. Thanks, Mark.
there-
Appreciate it.
Yeah, there is.
Thanks, everybody.
I had one page missing.
At this time, we'll move on to item number 5B on our agenda. This is a public hearing for consideration and recommendation to the city council for the Standing Rock East at Long Valley, located approximately 4200 East, 1400 South. The applicant is Don Bean. I'll turn the time over to staff for their report.
Thanks, Commissioner. The applicant is requesting approval of a preliminary plat for the Standing Rock East at Long Valley, which is located at Long Valley Road in SR 7. The applicant is proposing 191 home sites on an area coverage of 78.70 acres. The zoning designation at this particular location is planned community development, and the surrounding zoning is planned unit development to the north and east and planned community development to the south and west. The proposed subdivision does conform to the approved zoning. The request meets the subdivision requirements and other city ordinances as it relates to this location. Staff has reviewed the request and recommends approval with conditions of the preliminary plat as outlined. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend approval of the preliminary plat for the Standing Rock East at Long Valley subdivision to the City Council based on the following findings and subject to the following standard conditions. And we're happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Thanks, Eldon. Commissioners, I'll open the floor for any questions that you might have before we open the public hearing.
This is Commissioner Anderson. So where does this fit into the rest of the other projects we've approved out there? Just
So it's to the east. The other two that you looked at were to the west. So as you drive underneath the road there, you would turn left to enter this one.
can you show us on the map so we can kind of see where it sits in relation to the other stuff? I guess the county map.
Well, there's not going to be anything on the map, if you understand, when I go to this one. It's going to just be raw stuff out there. And we'll try to get as close as we can for you, but I make no promises. And I'm going to be taking a stab at this. And I think, because this is the main road coming in right through here, and it's going to be in this area right here to the best of my guesstimation.
And where are the other two that we already?
The first one you looked at was over here. And then the next one was over here. And then they'll have their clubhouse kind of right somewhere in here. And again, I'm a bit off. It's just rudimentary. But this was the first one you did, the townhomes. Then these were the single family lots, and now we're here.
Thank you.
Commissioners, while you're thinking of additional comments, I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. If there's anybody here in the chambers that would like to make a comment on this particular item, please come forward at this time. It does not look like anybody in the chamber would like to speak on this item. I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So Commissioner Musso, make a motion that we close the public hearing.
Shield second.
Got a first and a second, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Public hearing is closed at this time. I'll open the floor back up, commissioners, for questions for staff or the developer.
So is the developers here, right? Do you want to come on up?
Don't forget to state your name for the record, please, and thank you.
Yeah, my name is Don Bean.
Okay. Couple questions, Don. So these are all single family homes again, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And the mass grading's already started out there?
Yes, it has.
That looks good. How's the development coming with, or how's the road coming with the Washington Dam Road? I think that's the one question that most of the commissioners are going to always ask you with every time you stand up in front of us.
Sure. I talked to Jim. I think the city staff may have a little more information than I have. I talked to Jim today about that. Most of the road has been designed and they have the bids approved and accepted and they're ready to start. I believe there's a condemnation that needs to happen on one of the lots, but I don't know all the details on that.
I can talk in more depth on that. There was some unexpected delay on right-of-way acquisition. And so that the city council has not authorized condemnation at this point, but anytime you run into right-of-way problems, condemnation is one of the alternatives. I think the city's trying to avoid that at all costs. But yeah, there was just some delays. The project is ready to go as soon as right-of-way is acquired. There was a decision regarding location of a trail facility that if that could be adjusted might help with acquisition of right-of-way. And so I understand that the Public Works received the council's direction on that and has been trying to acquire right-of-way with that trail decision. I don't think it's complete, but
Okay,
but
thank you
those
for
were
the
the
clarification.
delays is right-of-way issues with some of the individual lot owners.
That's all, like I said, that's always going to be the elephant in the room.
It's our big concern as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, as soon as people see the development starting, that's the questions that I get all the time. What
Yeah.
about Washington Dam Road? Do you have an estimated time frame to complete this section that you're responsible for here?
Oh, that section of the road?
Yeah, no, not the section of the road, the whole, your portion of the development. Because my understanding is like a 10, 15-year project. Is
Yeah,
that
about
correct?
10 years.
Okay.
So is this going to be the first phase then, where you're doing the mass grading right now?
Where we're doing the mass grading, we'll start in where he has the number 1 and the number 2. Those will be the first 2 phases and we'll start simultaneously and then shortly followed by this one.
So the mass grading is actually on what?
One
It's
and
on
two.
1 and 2 right
One,
now?
2, and partly of this one as well.
Okay.
Don, is there any way, this is Commissioner Hanson, I'm going to ask this as rude as I can, not rude, but I don't know exactly how to ask this, but if I was expecting a downturn in the housing market in the next 10 years, is there a commitment to finish this project or is the project going to go depending on what the demand is for the development or is?
The speed will depend upon the demand, but D.R. Horton's the largest home builder in America, and we have a war chest that we've been saving, and we will build through the downturns.
Okay.
That's one of the advantages of being a publicly traded company and having some
wherewithal
resources to continue.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Anderson. I guess maybe a question for Mark. I don't remember the date that we were here with 1 and 2 a few months ago or whatever it was, 2 or 3 months ago, but at that time, you guys, we had initially said we were going to deny phase 2 because we didn't have any clear start date on the road. And then in talking to you guys, you had said at the time that the only thing we're waiting on was a BLM right away that needed to be found. And so we said, okay, it can go to city council, assuming that this BLM right away was gonna be found and that the road was gonna be started within the next, couple of months. Now it sounds like there were a lot more right away issues than just the BLM to be hashed out, which was not what we talked about 3 months ago.
This is Mark Rains, engineer for High Point. During the process of this, the project for the road, it was assumed by the city and the developer and records that we could find that most of the right-of-way or deferral agreements existed. After several months of digging and coming to the table to get each landowner to sign, some of that was not necessarily true. So it pushed off delays, and as normal in projects, stuff happens. So,
And I'll just speak to that. When 3 months ago, the private landowner's opposition was not known to the city. What has happened in the last 20 days, 21 days or so, the landowners, as you can see just to the north there of Dam Road, really formed an organized opposition to the trail, and such that they were unwilling to cooperate in any manner. And they had various concerns about the trail. A good example is most all of them are a lower elevation, and they would be coming up an incline to a trail where visibility would be poor, and many of them have trailers or industrial type vehicles, and so they were concerned about the safety of a trail there. And the conflict became that the city had planned for a trail along that stretch of road. Now there's other solutions and other opportunities, and recently the council authorized Public Works to reapproach all of them for their approval, removing the trail from that side of the road, essentially acknowledging their concerns and agreeing to plan any trails along there off of that slope where their lots are located down from the roadway elevation. My understanding is that's been successful, but not totally complete. But yeah, that was the issue, is that opposition wasn't known. It was the Public Works was under the impression that they were supporting the project, but then an opposition formed and we had to deal with it.
and that changes day by day.
So which trail which section of the trail is being abandoned then? Like, where is it at?
I
on the
can
map
give you
here?
some instruction. If you'll zoom in, and abandoned is probably not the correct word there.
Relocated.
It's just not being planned as part of the road project at this point. Drew, if you can zoom into those houses right there in the field portion there north of Dam Road. So at this location on the north side of the river, there's an existing trail built from the Sunrise Valley side. And then the city had planned for a trail on the north side of Dam Road as well, from Country Lane up to the Long Valley interchange. And about half of the north side of Dam Road trail had no problems. But the portion right there along the kind of farm properties where Drew's running his cursor, that's where we ran into the organized opposition. And that's where the issues with the incline between, where their lots are sitting and where the trail would sit, as well as other concerns about just, public access to fields and farms and pastures. And there were a lot of issues, but the primary one that really resonated was just the safety with the type of traffic that they have coming up to a trail with poor visibility. The city council authorized to design that trail elsewhere. And it won't be part of this road expansion project at this time. And where exactly they put the trail will be a decision that the council makes in the future.
So is the rest of the trail getting built from Country Way or not?
So
No.
it's going to be full right of way width. If you see the very last parcel on the south side of the road, that's just dirt right there. The west property line of that is where the road starts necking down to this smaller amount. And so the trail will end right there. Unless.
But it
something
will
else-
start from Country Ways. to-
Countryway to there, because we don't have any opposition to a little further west, one more property west. So we have no opposition, little opposition or no opposition west of there. So a full right way width will be built to that location. But we're having to work with the landowners to get the road built for the rest. So the ultimate problem is, these guys moved out here when it was a 2-track dirt road, and they're not necessarily happy that there's a major travel corridor now. So to propose anything else is difficult.
Well, getting in and off of it's going to be a bear for
Yeah.
those folks. I mean,
It's a
you can
bear
understand-
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you can understand it.
Yeah, my personal opinion would be is if there was more lanes, it'd be easier to get in and off of that road. But when you're dealing with stuff like this, emotions get in the way, logic doesn't necessarily prevail. So
And it's not an easy issue. The reality of it is
it's not,
just, there's-
it was a very hard design.
yeah, that's the ridge line to the south of the road is not very forgiving. There's not a lot of room to move south. One of the future trail concepts might be to have a trail run through that area somehow. But the council hasn't abandoned the concept of connecting its trails, but they have realized that putting it along that road has created more opposition than the project can handle. And if the project is going to be done on the timeframe they desire, the council's decision was to authorize removing it from the plan. What Mr. Rains had mentioned as far as it stopping at that point, I understand Public Works and the Parks Department might even pull that back depending on what they decide as to where they want a future trail to connect. But that would, again, that's a moving target. That's a result of the opposition that wasn't expected.
I mean, I guess, and in, I guess, full disclosure here, part of what I'm asking that for is because, and I'm not the only one. I mean, if that trail gets removed from the plan or whatever, I mean, I'm building a house for a client right on that trail, and we base the entire elevation of the pad, the public works, the grading, the house, everything on that trail. And if it gets pulled out, then the whole entire everything falls apart. And so, and I'm not the only one. So again, my client was in support of this and went along with it. It was fine. But if it gets pulled out, then suddenly, and I'm not the only one, that'll change the grading for a bunch of other people too. So if that happens, I mean, people need to know so they can adjust accordingly. That's all.
If that trail is pulled, the trails are ran at 2% cross slope over 10 feet. So we're only talking a 1/10. But my guess is they would still want the right of way, and it would be a graded section or a sidewalk, or who knows at this point what.
Right, but we're talking
what's-
10 feet of dirt as, in front of their house as
Well,
opposed to whatever.
you've
It
got
would
the-
still maintain it within the right of way. So the lot grading wouldn't change. That the elevation for the lot is adequate. And I've worked with you from day one, and I haven't changed that grade yet. So
Good.
You've got the canal easement that's resides under there. And the reason why the trail was planned on top of it was because putting vehicular traffic on there, you have to stack a lot deeper fill on it. And so I don't recall any comment in the conversation about trying to resolve the opposition that would change the grading that's planned. It would just mean that there's not going to be a built trail at that location, but the grading, I think, is going to stay similar to what it's planned at.
we're very limited on what we can do with the grades.
So again, this is Commissioner Anderson. So my big concern here is that, I mean, especially after our talk here, I think that if we approve further phases in here, I think we're putting the horse before the cart here. And I mean, again, I'm building a house right on Washington Dam Road, and it's one house, and just getting on and off the road to that one house is like a major traffic jam. I turn one truck off onto that and it backs up trucks forever. I mean,
Let me add
the
one
road is
thing
a
for you.
disaster right now.
So part of this development requires a 16-inch water line to get to to the area to support the water needs. You're aware, part of a development process, speaking to the final plat, is at the very end, when everything's done, Public Works has to sign off and say there's everything that was needed for the project, infrastructure wise, is there or it's bonded for. That's why Public Works signs a final plat. So the insurances are there to make sure that the things that are done get done before they can start building houses. The tough thing with Washington Dam Road is it's a moving target. We'll get it done. We'll get it done as soon as we can. And the hope is, and I believe that we'll get done before the dirt work gets done. So there is insurances in place that are part of the city steps to alleviate your concerns on that matter. So I agree, that road's a disaster already. I'm baffled of the opposition for the road.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not in opposition to the project whatsoever. I mean, I just think this road needs to go in before we get, too much going over there. That's my big concern. I want to make sure you have the infrastructure to handle, that volume work, even if it is just dirt work. And I'm worried that, if we give preliminary plat approval now and then it goes to city council, then it's too easy for something like this just to keep getting kicked down the road. And suddenly you're like, oh crap, we don't have a road.
So from the
That's all.
city's perspective, it's the applicant that bears the risk of this road work. If the road work doesn't complete, they're investing in the groundwork and platting that they know they'll never get any building permits or COs for because there's no water there. And there's a contract between the applicant and the city where the applicant's funding a portion of the project because they know that it's being made so that their development can have water. And so they're really the ones investing in the road completion. The city would love to see Dam Road improved. There's no question about that. But the project itself doesn't add any risk to the city and puts all the risk on the applicant. And so the city, as a contracting party with the applicant, has tried to be diligent in pursuing the unexpected delays. But the applicant is the one that bears the risk of all of those details coming through in time. And if they don't come through in time, the applicant bears all of that delay.
Right. And I'm not necessarily trying to shift risk or put any more risk on them. I just want to make sure that for everybody's sake that this road gets done before we have too much work. Yeah.
Well, I think they understand that. And I think we ought to be thankful that they're putting the road in.
No, I'm not in opposition. That's not what I'm saying. I've seen too many of these things just kind of keep getting kicked down the road and like, oh yeah, we're going to get that taken care of. And pretty soon you're like, oh crap, we're in it.
I think they just want to have their quivers ready when the road's done that they can start developing.
That's correct. Yeah.
No, and I understand that. I guess
I agree with your concern and it's valid. But in this case, as things sit, we couldn't build past. We could build the surface improvements, the underground improvements on the project, but we can't go vertical until the road's in. So
that's what.
And that's when the big traffic increase would happen. So.
And Don being again with the developer, and we are willing to take that risk. And what we want to have from what we're asking from you is to move it as far along as we possibly can. So once that road is done, we're ready to go and can move forward.
Don, this is Commissioner Hanson. Good luck with this project. I look forward to it. This is a big piece of land. It's a big project. A lot of people in the city are talking about. I do. I don't know if I was necessarily for the smaller homes at the beginning, but I'm really interested to see what this looks like in the end. So I'm excited for it, and we'll try to do everything we can. Commissioners, are there other questions for either Don or Mark or any of the staff before we look for a motion on this item?
And before I leave, I just want to say, as of 2 hours ago, I'm now a citizen of Washington City. I just signed on the house before I got here.
Did you buy on Washington Dam Road?
I should have got one of those homes. So thank you for your service.
Yeah.
So did you pay 60,000 over asking? That's the other question.
No, but I closed in a couple of weeks, so that was their other thing. It was way too much though.
He's the opposition. He's one of the. Oh, boy.
If we close that.
Yeah, we've closed the public hearing. At this time, we're just looking for a motion on item 5B.
This is Commissioner Bullock. I'll make a motion to recommend approval of the preliminary plat for Standing Rock East at Long Valley subdivision located at Long Valley Road and SR7 with the standard 12 conditions.
This Shield, I'd second that.
I've got a first by Bullock, a second by Commissioner Shield. Individual voting, Commissioner Anderson.
Aye, but I'd like to note that the road needs to be a priority on this, rather than just the standard 12 conditions, that the road needs to be something that city council keeps at top of mind. Completion of Washington Dam Road.
Drew, do we need to add that as a condition, or is that something that's just been noted and well aware?
In the record sufficient.
It's in the record?
Yeah.
Okay. Anderson, I had aye, is that correct? Shield,
Aye.
Bullock,
Aye.
Musso.
Aye.
I'm Hanson. I'm an aye as well. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, gentlemen, for your attendance. Move to item number 6A. This is a conditional use permit. This is a public hearing as well to consider the approval of permit C-21-04 for an additional dish wireless antenna equipment cabinet and ice bridge located approximately Coral Canyon in SR9. The applicant is Dish Wireless. Oh boy, I should have looked at this one earlier. Craig, I'll mess up your name. I apologize. Craig Chagnon? I don't know.
Shagnon, correct.
Chagnon. All right, thank you. I'm sorry for that. Staff will turn the time over to you for your report.
Thanks, Commissioner. The applicant is requesting approval of a conditional use permit to modify the existing cell tower located at the east end of Coral Canyon, as seen from the south side of SR9 and approximately 2200 north. The applicant is proposing the addition of an underground fiber line from an existing manhole off of Doral Court to the cell tower. He is also requesting to extend power from the existing transformer to the proposed new dish platform, and will be adding a 5-foot by 7-foot metal platform to house new equipment. He's going to construct an ice bridge between the proposed equipment and existing cell tower and install an antenna system approximately 10 feet lower than the already existing antennas. The existing antennas are installed at approximately 100 feet, and the new antennas will be right around the 90-foot mark line. The existing cell tower and equipment is enclosed by a 50 by 70-foot chain link fence. This area is not going to be expanded. The proposed new equipment and platform will be inside of this existing fenced off area. The zoning designation at this particular location is planned community development, and the surrounding zoning is planned community development to the north, east, south, and west. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve C-21-04, allowing modifications to be made to the existing cell tower with the findings and conditions as outlined below. And we're happy to answer any questions that you may have at this time.
Thanks, Eldon. Commissioners, I'll open the floor for any questions for staff or Mr. Shagnon.
Commissioners, on a side note, there was one comment that came in after the fact. I can read that in when you're ready to do so.
Okay, at this time, that's what I'll do. But prior to any comments from the commissioners, I'll open up the public hearing. If there's anybody here in the chambers that would like to speak on this item, please come forward. It does not look like there is anybody here that would like to speak to that. I look for a motion to close the public. Actually, I'll at this time, Eldon, if you could read that public comment during the public hearing. Thank you.
This is from Sharon Ruppel, and she states, hello. I am a property owner in Coral Canyon on the 14th Fairway Drive. My question and concern is, does this additional dish wireless antenna have anything to do with 5G? I do not want any 5G network towers located within 5 miles of my property. Thank you.
Thanks, Eldon. At this time, I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
This is Sheila. I would propose we close this public hearing.
This is Musso. I second that.
I've got a first and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the public hearing is now closed. At this time, commissioners will open up the floor to any comments or questions. This is Commissioner Hanson. Craig, I have a question for you. Is this new work being added because of the number of homes that have been added to the area, or what is the reasoning for adding this additional equipment?
Well, a couple of things is happening. One is Dish Wireless has a nationwide service coming out. They're installing some 20,000 sites nationwide. So they're essentially an equivalent of one of the big four carriers that you're probably familiar with. Dish is getting into that market. It's pretty monumental. We don't see that a lot, but they're building this nationwide network to meet the demands of communities. It's definitely about providing the service based upon demand, and that's people and their devices. And so they've identified the markets they want to be in and where there's a need. And typically the wireless industry likes to fill in the gaps, so to speak, improve the coverage. And so, yeah, I think it's probably definitely tied to growth. I don't know your city as well as some others, but I imagine it's growing. And from sitting through this meeting and listening to some of the previous development plans attest to that. So yes.
Okay, thank you. Does future growth look any different than this? If it continues to grow here, which we expect that, would future growth look similar to this, or would there need to be another tower constructed, or what would that look like?
Well, that kind of depends. I mean, the carriers provide the service to their customers. And so they make decisions about where they want to invest their capital based upon demand. And so if they see a market that doesn't provide the coverage to meet the demand, they'll look at putting equipment in there. That could be on an existing tower in most cases, or it could be a new tower build. This particular tower has room for more co-locators. We like to co-locate as many carriers as we can on the towers that we own and fill them up, as opposed to building a new tower, but sometimes that need arises.
Okay, that was kind of exactly what I was kind of curious is, does this, it sounds like you could add more antennas as this one is suggested here in item number 3 on one of our pictures here. How many more of those could this tower hold before you couldn't put them on this tower anymore? Does that make sense? Is it 10? Is it 5? Is it 2?
Well, your question, you're looking for a quantity of antennas or of carriers?
Yeah, antennas. Similar to what's being proposed tonight. As we keep growing, how many more can we add to this before we have to worry about finding a new place for a new tower?
Yeah, so a couple of things come into play. One is that every tower needs to have to be structurally sound, right? The tower needs to be able to handle whatever load is being proposed to put up there. I have a structural analysis for this tower. I can't remember where it's at, but I think there's plenty of load available to support more equipment. It's also a pretty tall tower. I deal with a lot of towers, so I'm sorry if I don't know exactly. I think what this one is 100 feet. But on a typical, on a 100-foot tower, we can fit 3 or 4 carriers. This was an AT&T tower originally that we acquired. And AT&T has been the only carrier on there until now. So Dish is proposing to be the second co-location. It could probably fit 1 or 2 more if anybody decided they wanted to be on the tower and and it passes all of our due diligence and checkpoints. Then we drill down to specific carriers. So what you're looking at on, I think, sheet A3 there is the carrier installation at their center line. And they put up an antenna array consisting of a mount, typically, pipes that hold the antenna. In this case, I'm looking at your screen, so it's a little cut off. Let me get my, for that page here in the drawings.
The one that
This
I was,
is this is a 3-sector, right? Because you want your radio signal to be going out and getting as much coverage you want in the surrounding areas. So typically an antenna arrays 3 or 4 sectors, and there could be 1, 2, 3, or even 4 antennas on a sector. It just depends.
okay.
So looking at this one, I see a couple of vacant spots. If Dish decided they wanted to add a couple antennas in a couple of years, which is probable, they could come by. Maybe they'll add 1 more or 2 more per sector. 3 to 6 more antennas could go up there, which I would think will be a pretty robust cell signal at that point,
Okay.
if it ever happened. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
This is Sheil. I just have a question for you. I'm not an IT guy, but does the current antennas allow 5G?
The proposed antennas, so my general answer to that question is, yeah, everybody's going to be moving towards 5G and deploying 5G technology. Whether these specific ones are there yet, I believe that they are going to be providing a 5G service. And if you'd like me to address the previous comment, I can do that as well.
Yeah.
I would be interested in your comments regards to the previous comment. However, I will say that one of the things that we're having difficulty on this end is understanding. I don't know if it's because of the volume of some of the equipment on our side or possibly your side, but just so you know, we're having a hard time understanding some of the things that you're saying based on some audio difficulties. But I would like to, I didn't realize there was opposition to 5G. Maybe that's me being naive, but I want to ask you about that.
Well, I think there is public knowledge. And can you hear me okay now?
It's just loud.
It's just loud.
I'm loud?
Yes. And I don't know if that's on our end or on your end.
I think it's on ours.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I think there is public knowledge that there's opposition to 5G. Anytime the question of radio frequency signals come in to play, people need to learn that stuff for themselves. I would point them to the FCC, and the American Medical Association has information addressing 5G and cell phone signals. And then and I would encourage that person to go out and educate themselves a little bit about that before reaching a conclusion about public safety.
All right. Well, the comment's been noted, and thank you for your comments on that. Commissioners, any other questions? And if not, I'll look for a motion on this item.
This is Commissioner Shield. I'd make a motion that we approve a conditional use permit to modify the existing cell tower located at the east end of Coral Canyon as seen from the south side of SR9 and approximately 2200 north. And recommend that we send this to City Council with
The final say,
what's that?
a conditional use permit, where the final say.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yours to approve or
Oh, it's ours to approve? Oh, okay, then we'll kibosh the city council and we'll approve it. How's that?
that's good.
This is Miller. Second that.
I've got a first by Commissioner Shield. I've got a second by Commissioner Bullock, individual voting, Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Commissioner Shield,
Aye.
Commissioner Bullock,
Aye.
Commissioner Musso, Commissioner Hanson. I'm an aye as well. The motion passes. Greg, thanks for being on the phone. Appreciate your attendance. And
Likewise. Thank you.
at this time, I just have a question for Thad on this. Is this something that we can reasonably expect to be something in the future that people are going to be opposed to 5G in our area? Like, I didn't.
I know that I'm aware publicly that there's people that are really excited for 5G and there's people that think 5G will impact their health. That dynamic existed before 5G. There were people that thought having a cell phone near their body was going to impair their health and people that loved it, right? And so I'm not sure that the divergence is any different than what it's ever been, but with the advent of 5G, it's certainly another opportunity for those positions to be highlighted again. But I would guess that's not the last comment this city will hear about 5G.
Okay.
One of the challenges is, sometimes people ask a candidate for a position in this city, what are you going to do about, and let's use a federal issue about the Second Amendment, gun rights. And the reality is local government has a lot of authority, but not that authority. And a lot of the communication and airwave issues are larger than local authority.
Yeah.
If there's an antenna in place that's been authorized and permitted by the city, providers are allowed to install technology that's been approved federally. And so I'm not sure that this board, this commission, nor the planning or the city council will ever get to say, we approve of or we deny of 5G. That's a decision that's made by federal regulatory bodies.
Yeah.
That just a follow-up question and comment on that. Because I've had, in answer to your question, Jason, my brother is he's an engineer that designs cell towers and does this for a living. And so we've had like exhaustive discussions about this, and he's had all sorts of, he's had to work with people that are in opposition to 5G and so forth. And you've got two things. You got proximity to a person, and you've got intensity of the airwaves. Those are the two things that matter. So like your cell phone being right next to your head, the proximity is what makes it dangerous, but it's logarithmic. So as you get the phone out here, or you're using your Bluetooth, not as dangerous. As far as intensity, FM towers are the most dangerous towers there are airwave wise, because they're the most powerful and they've been around for a long time. So, but again, I think the question is, it's not really necessarily local jurisdictional authority, whether it's safe or not. Although and this is my question for you, Thad. I don't know if in the findings here we've got on the agenda item, it says that, staff has found that in the particular case, no detrimental effect to the health, safety, or general welfare of the person's yada, yada. I'm not sure if we want to say that blanket statement, whether it is or isn't, particularly safe or not, for the same reasons that, anyway, just a comment.
Sure.
But I'm not sure if that's
that
a statement we want to be saying.
Yeah, that
as a city, that's all.
That's up to this body. The reality is, before this application, there were people in our community who felt like that antenna was impacting their health, and we're not surprised that there's people that think a modification to the antenna will impact their health. And there's authority on both sides of this. This is one of those areas where the law has allowed it federally. And to the extent that we've permitted an antenna, the applicant has the right to come and request changes. If you deny this application, you're still going to have 5G technology on that tower.
Yeah.
That's the reality I wanted to help.
Well, that's all I wanted to say. I don't think we deny, and we already passed it, but I think that we limit it to what you just said, that the FCC has approved such things, and therefore it's within the approval list. I just don't think we should put just what it says here in section 2, where we find that it's not injurious to anyone's health. I don't think that's, any of us have the necessary experience to be able to say whether it does or doesn't. That's all.
Yeah, and there may not be enough data before you to make that
Sure.
conclusion. And the movement can amend their motion and exclude that if they'd like. Was it your motion, Commissioner Shill?
And you're suggesting that just because it's not in our best interest from a legal standpoint to say that, because somebody
Legal for
could
the
point to
city.
that in the future. Yeah.
Correct, because none of us have the ability to say whether item number 2 is true or not.
I think you're not saying 2 is true or correct, or true or false. You're just saying this commission feels like it hasn't got enough information as to the health and welfare of the population in this
And
application.
it's been approved by the FCC. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know.
So
Either way. I guess my
I'll-
question.
I'd strike it. I'm fine with that. This is Sheil.
The reason that is in there is not because they expect that the commission's had a medical study on every application, because,
We just don't want the city at risk.
well, not that either. Because every single application likely can be debated as to whether it promotes the health and welfare. The reason that statement is in there is because one of this commission's charges as being occupied with citizens of the community is that one of your findings is that this is not detrimental to the health and welfare of the citizens.
Which we don't know.
And if you found that, great. If you don't feel like there's enough information to make that conclusion, but you still think it's a benefit to the community, you can pass your motion.
And that's
And so-
my position, is that I don't think we have the ability to determine whether it is or isn't detrimental. The reason I'm addressing this is because there was a lady wrote in with that specific thing, and I'm just saying we don't have the experience or ability to say whether it does or doesn't. However, the other conditions are met, and the FCC approves this sort of thing. So I still think we pass it. That's all I'm saying.
And there would be the question of health, safety, or general welfare. Those are the three things. And maybe your motion would be to just remove health from that, because I'm sure there are people that say safety and general welfare are pretty, clear to this body, but health maybe isn't.
Okay,
And so
I would rescind it and repropose. I should pull that out then.
Councilman, just modify it. Don't read your whole thing. Again, you
Yeah,
guys, just to help you out, just
Let's
modify it,
take
drop
the
that
health
word.
out. Amen.
And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
the amendment is in condition number 2, that you're removing health from your motion, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, I've got an amendment to the motion by Shield as the first. I need a second.
Anderson, this is second.
Anderson, second. I'm assuming I need to have an individual voting again. Anderson,
Aye.
Shield,
Aye.
Bullock,
Aye.
Musso.
Aye.
I'm Hanson. I'm an aye as well. Motion passes. That will be struck. Is that something that Craig, I don't know if Craig even needs to be notified of it or not, but I don't expect he's still on the line. So,
No.
sorry about that. That was a longer question than I think I was intending, but I'm glad we had the discussion.
Yeah.
Item number 7A. This is city code amendment, public hearing as well for consideration and recommendation to the city council for a city code amendment to amend the Title IX, Chapter 6, standardized street addressing to include multi-family project letters and numbers on buildings. The applicant is Washington City. Let's see if I can pronounce his name correctly. Drew Larman.
That's close enough for the people I go hang around with, so that's good. Thank you, commissioners. Basically, I'll keep this simple. The first paragraph on here is already in the code that we just added this actually not too long ago in the last 2 years. But because of all these apartment buildings we've been putting up and trying to have emergency services feel comfortable with finding places, et cetera, we've felt the need to add letter A with its accompanying 1 through 7 items on it. So again, the first paragraph was the end of the current addressing code of the city, but we want to add A and everything associated with it. I won't read all of that unless you feel it's necessary, but basically we're just adding, the biggest thing that is pointed out in here is number 5. And I will point directly to it and I'll read it out, that the sides of the letters shall be 15 inches high for single-story buildings, 21 inches high for 2-story buildings, and 27 inches high for 3-story buildings and higher. Letters should be placed near the top of the building to avoid obstruction and maximize visibility. Trees shall not be permitted to be planted below the attached letters or in a way that could potentially obstruct the letters when fully mature. This is the thing. So if you drive to these new apartment complexes, their address is based on a letter of the building and then the number of the unit they're in, which is based upon the floor that they live on. So their address could be 123 State Street, Building H, Unit 117. That means they're on the first floor and they're the 17th unit. So this just helps us to have emergency services, the deliveries, anything else to be able to find people a little bit easier and a little bit faster. So if you have any questions, hopefully you read these. Again, it's simple reading, but this is just to be in our uniform addressing for the city.
Drew, this Commissioner Hanson, what happens to anything in the city that doesn't meet this requirement? Is it grandfathered in to stay the way it is, or does it need to change things?
It's grandfathered.
Yeah, it's grandfathered in. We've been trying, most of them have been helping us out here the last 2 or 3. Have done it without this. They see the need for it and they've been accommodating. So the last, main projects have actually been going to this already.
Okay. Thank you.
Drew, this is Commissioner Anderson. So I can understand with, apartment buildings, say, 3 and 4 stories or whatever, maybe even with 2 stories, but with the single story building, 15-inch letters up. I mean, so when you're saying at the top of the building, what are we talking? We're talking like up near the soffit or whatever. It's just, as opposed to say like 6 feet up on the side of the unit or the garage or whatever.
Correct, but it's only if there's multiple units within it.
Right, we say like it's a 4-plex or something like that.
Right. Then you go back to the first part of this ordinance says, as soon, where they can see it from the main entrance coming in, the best visibility for it if I'm driving an ambulance and I'm coming up and I've got 17 4-plexes, so they're going to be A, B, C, D, etc. Where I drive in, I want that. And as I turn right or left through the complex, when I see that building, the best place possible that we could see it. And that's determined by the building department guys, the fire department guys. There's 2 or 3 people that look at that and come to a conclusion on that.
So if it's a 4-plex, we're just saying a sign on the building and then each individual unit has a letter, or the building has a letter and each individual unit has a number.
Has a number. Yeah.
Each unit has a number and the building has a letter.
Yes.
So do the individual unit numbers, are they just regular numbers like we're currently doing, and it's just the letter that's big and up high and is lighted, or is everything big, up high and lighted?
No, it's just it's just on, like I say, on these multi-floor ones, we want that up there and lit up.
So
all of them need to be lit. Yes. All need to be lit, but it's in the most conspicuous place that you don't have to, make as much extra effort as possible to figure out which one you're at.
So again, I'm just trying to clarify. So the unit numbers, they need to be lit as well?
No.
So it's just the letter up high that's big that needs to be lit?
Yes, on multiple buildings, yes.
So Drew, and that's only with the building or units with similar addresses, correct? So I mean,
Correct.
if you go into, and I'm just thinking of Freedom Village as an example, you go in there and each one of those units has their own individual house number. They're not necessarily 4-plexes, but I mean, they serve kind of a similar purpose. But the stuff that Hoops is built across the street from that, those 4-plexes, then does each 4-plex in that complex have its own address, or does each unit in that complex?
No, they all have a street. It's a private street, but it's still a street that they're associated. Their address is off of that street.
Right.
It's the ones that come off of a main street that all have a shared parking area. That we, that's when we go to these multiple buildings.
So
One
like
main
the big
address.
complexes. Yeah, the big complexes off Telegraph is
Correct.
what
It's not for your townhome ones that are off of a private or a public street, because they'll have individual addressing.
Okay.
Okay, so this wouldn't be individually tax ID townhomes then?
No.
Okay. I guess that was kind of my question. My next question was just,
Well, I guess to be honest with you, it possibly could. If they had common area and shared parking areas, it possibly could. I'm not going to cancel that out. That it won't.
I'm looking at it from this perspective of, you know, the HOA, for example, an HOA would have to maintain these lighted numbers. And if they go out, I mean, I've put in quite a few of these lighted numbers and they go out frequently. And they're not in like a common area. They're mounted to somebody's unit and you have to like go into their unit and pull wiring. And it's a lot more complicated than just fixing it. It's the lighted portion is what I'm hung up on, I guess, just for that reason, for long-term maintenance. And the fact that adding lighted to it's going to add $600 or $700 to a building, which I guess just another cost, but still.
So I don't forget, at this time, I'm going to open up a public hearing. This is a public hearing. I'm going to open it up. If anybody here in the chambers would like to speak on this particular item, please come forward. Or if there was anything that was submitted after the fact. It doesn't look like there's anybody here in the chamber. And I believe there's no comments that were submitted, so I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
This Commissioner Musso so moved.
Bullock, second.
Got a first and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the public hearing is closed. I'll open the floor back up, commissioners, for any additional questions that you might have. And if there are,
It's kind of fun to contrast this proposed change to the size of the lettering when we were kids. It just shows you that as times have changed, you know, just the expectation of, yeah, these are really big compared. Yeah. And it used to be what, a 3-inch letter or something, maybe not even 3 inches. And, you know, our communities are changing and our building standards are changing. And it's just times are changing. Like, I mean, I've done this in St. George, for example. They do this with the numbers over there already, minus the lighted part. So I'm familiar with this. It's just the lighted part is what I have an issue with, just from a maintenance standpoint, and adding another expense to buildings that are supposed to be, you know, affordable housing.
I would have thought that the lighted part is just something you pull off the top cover and change the bulbs, and it's not that easy. So it's actually wired. Interesting. Well, any other comments, commissioners? And if not, I'll look for a motion on item 7A.
You may just ask Drew on the lighted wording. Drew, is it your office's opinion that lighted means that the numbers themselves need to be electrified and lighted, or that they could be installed on a lighted portion of the building? For example, a pretty traditional, you know, outdoor light that would light those numbers, because the ordinance also requires that the coloring be in contrast to the background.
Yeah, this is actually, I think, a heavy portion of this coming from your fire department. I'm not trying to blame them. I'm just saying this helps them at night, and they're, you know, on the emergency services side. I mean, if you're spending $700 to light up a thing, then I need to find out who's selling you stuff, because I want that market. But I know it does add a cost to it. But like I say, that, you know, just to answer Councilman Segmiller's question, is that it just needs to be lit to my, you know, again, it's not coming from my department. I'm just running this ordinance change because that's what I get to do as part of my job.
So maybe the commission could say change shall be lighted. You could say shall be illuminated for nighttime visibility, because that would allow it to not have to be independently wired, but that some wiring somewhere would be installed in a location that's illuminated. And so, you know, there is requirements here as far as where it should be located on the building, as far as the furthest pop out and things like that. And if a builder wanted to avoid the expense of independently lighting those numbers, they would need to, you know, install an outdoor light at the location that is
if it's
required.
high up on the building anyways, you could have like a soffit light right there, which would be easy.
Correct. Or
And-
they
and
might
if someone-
even, and they might accept solar. I don't know. We'd have to ask.
And if someone wanted to install a lighted number, they could do that too. Just, I think it at least gives you the choice, just because if you put it in, then you've got to think about the maintenance of it as well. I like that idea.
Let's add that.
There's also that old saying, if it saves a life, then that was a well invested, whatever that dollar was. I'm sure that's how an emergency persons would answer that.
Sure. I'm just thinking if the light, if you got a low volt lighted light and it goes out, who's going to police it to make sure it goes back up? And I've just replaced a lot of those over the years and they're not the most fun to deal with. Anyway.
Yep.
This is Commissioner Anderson. I make a motion to amend a portion of the city code, more specifically Title VI, Public Ways and Property, amending Chapter 7, Standardized Street Addressing, subsection 6-7-6, multifamily residential, with, I want to say this, with the recommendations as listed in section A, including number 1, number 2, number 3, 4, 5, and 7, and with item number 6 saying letters shall be illuminated for nighttime visibility.
And just for clarity on the motion is recommending this text as presented for an ordinance change with the change to number 6 that's made by the motion.
Correct.
The council will see this as listed and then will be advised that the commission's recommendation was to make an amendment there. And I'm sure when they're aware of that recommendation, they'll have their own discussion about the topic.
Okay.
This is Commissioner Musso. I second the motion.
I've got a first by Commissioner Anderson, a second by Commissioner Musso. Individual voting, Commissioner Anderson,
Aye.
Shield. Aye. Bullock.
Aye.
Musso.
Aye.
Excuse me, I'm Hanson. I'm an aye as well. The motion passes. Recommendation to City Council is approval. And Commissioner Bullock, I apologize. I forgot that you stepped in as a full-time as Van stepped off, correct? Okay, I apologize for that. Other than that, is there anything else, commissioners, that needs to be addressed this evening before we adjourn? No? I'll look for a motion to adjourn the meeting at this time. It's 7:15.
I'll make that motion.
I'd second it.
Got a first and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any approved? I'm sorry, any opposed? All right. Commission meeting is adjourned. Thank you.